everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on part 5 of our dive into Scum Villain's self-saving system. And as of right now, we are over the halfway point of the reactions for this volume. It doesn't seem like it with what we've got done, but I only have this part here will be about the halfway point, and then there'll be, excuse me, hold on. That's the weirdest sneeze. I mowed my yard yesterday. So I've got a bunch of allergy stuff going on. Wow, that was the most anticlimactic sneeze in the history of sneezes. Anyway, that's going to set the tone for today. We're going to be looking at chapters 13 through 15, which is pages 96 to 119 on the digital file, pages 123 to 152 in the book. So we'll be about halfway through by the time we finish this volume, so that's exciting. Yes, halfway through volume 1, which is great. So we'll have this month and next month to go through the volume 1. So what a wonderful summer, what a great summer we're having. But as of last week, it looks like the sky hammer arm demon is about to lunge after Luo. And we all know how this song and dance goes from the donghua, that Shen is going to step in and get himself poisoned. Now, so far, the book has differed a little bit from the donghua, just ever so slightly. So I'm really excited to see how that goes and see what we get. But yeah, I'm really excited to see the differences that are going to take place. But I've got some comments before we start to go over with that. So Blue Turnips 1912 had some interesting notes because I was questioning about the medicine. The whole medicine, I was like, why does it feel like it's different in the donghua than it was in the novel? The answer is because it was. So Blue Turnips talked about how in the donghua, the medicine shifted around. They shifted around events for comedic effect in the donghua, where Shen tried twice to give Luo Binghe the medicine. The first, when he first met him, this is where Shen QingQiu actually ends up drinking it and gets the system warning, which I do remember that from the donghua. And then the second time is in the carriage. So I was like, okay, so there was an extra time in the donghua. That's why it was throwing me off in the novel. And I'm like, why does this seem different? Because it was. So thank you, Blue Turnips, for pointing that out and letting us know that. That's important. Second, the golden finger. So, Be Happy asked if I had checked the end notes after chapter 1. And I was like, I feel like the first week that I was reading things, let me see here. The first week I was reading things, I remember that I had a different digital file, so I may not have gotten through everything. And so, there's something about concubines. I want to see here with chapter 1 if there was anything about the golden finger that the book makes note of. Because Be Happy noted that there might be something at the very end of chapter 1 that was like a footnote left in here that I just didn't happen to see. And I don't know if that's the case or not. So we're going to just double check real quick before we start. But everybody's been trying to give me comments about the golden finger. And because apparently it's a trope. No. There's not a note. There's not a note. So, but anyways, people have been trying to say that it is a Chinese trope, and they've been trying to explain it. And they said you might as well know. You're not gonna. And so the moderators asked me, they're like, "Do you want to read some comments?" There were some comments I did not read. So if you didn't get a response from me, the moderator said, "That's a little too much info. You don't need to know that." But there was a comment or two that were talking about the golden finger as a Chinese trope. And the moderators were like, the novel's never going to explain this to you, so you can read these. And I was like, okay. But basically, it is a Chinese trope, the golden finger is, where the party basically gravitates towards the protagonist. And the protagonist is allowed to overcome obstacles, become OP, etc. Basically, the golden finger means the protagonist can do no wrong. It's a Chinese trope that's in a lot of stories. I'm like, oh, so the Gary Stu, Mary Stu title gets a physical trope. Oh. And so, basically, Luo Binghe's personality is his golden finger, and I'm still going to argue that it's his penis that allows him to get away away with all the things. I'm just gonna say it. We're just gonna go with it. But one of the commenters was like, I love how you made all these crazy theories up when it's just a Chinese trope. And I'm like, oh, okay. Why can't, let me have fun. Let me have fun with my theories. I think that what good is reading the story if we can't have a few giggles, right? In this feral fandom. I believe I have joined the feral fandom. I don't think I've been hazed yet. Well, unless Skinzoon, as y'all call him, Skinzoon, unless that was the hazing, but I have a feeling it's not. So we'll see where that goes. But Cool Ice Princess, y'all, I love you all trying so hard to help me translate. I love you all are trying so hard to help me pronounce these names. And here's the thing, here's the problem, y'all. You all can tell me 1,000 times how to say the names. I know you can. And I will say them to myself and I'm like, yeah, this is how it is. And then when I go to read the story, my brain's like, nope, go back. Because my brain as an English teacher is so hardwired to how it's pronounced in English and how phonics are in English. My brain is so hardwired to English phonics that translating it, when I see an X, I have a sound that associates with that. When I see a Q, I have a sound that associates with that. And my brain just has a hard time transitioning. I took Spanish in college. Can I speak any Spanish? God, no, because my brain was like, just cram it until you take the test and then forget about it because we don't have space. So that's where I am. I know gato and I know biblioteca. But Cool Ice Princess was basically saying, I did thought this was, it's like, it's UA. My thing is with Chinese and Mandarin especially, it's like they have extra vowel sounds, extra sounds. Instead of it being like you, they're like UA. I'm like, it's you. There is no extra sound. Stop it. UA. Qingyan. Qingyan makes sense. I understand now that the Q is a ch sound. Chin, like chincho. Like chincho. Like Shen QingQiu. I get that. I've gotten that. But like Qingyan. But the UA, I'm like, oh my God, why is there an extra letter? Why is there an extra syllable? And then the Kang is pronounced sang, like tsunami, sang, Sangchong. So Sangchong. This whole series is a tongue twister. It is so hard. Whoever does the audiobook for this book, God bless you. Godspeed, because this is going to be really difficult unless you're like a native speaker that just happens to know English as well. But Sangchong, I'll try to remember Sangchong because that is a little bit, that is like the C being a TS sound. Now the one that gets me is what I've been saying is dire. It's supposed to be dier. It's DIE. It's die. And you want me to pronounce it D? No. Spell it right. I'm like, here's my thing with translation. If you're going off of translating from Mandarin into English, just say DEE. Why do you say DIE? When you're expecting your audience to translate it as dier, why are you spelling it dier? Spell it correctly. You're translating from one language to another. Make it work in the other language you're translating it to. Ah. And then Shiji is supposed to be Shijie. It's Shiji. Just, you're gonna have to bear with me. And then Shimei makes sense, right? And then Shenmo. But like I said, I appreciate and I'm grateful that people are trying to help. But at some point in this novel, you all are just going to sit back and say, just let Romania be wrong in how she's pronouncing it. I'm sorry if it breaks the illusion. I'm sorry if it breaks the fantasy as you're reading with me. But my brain, I'm trying, but it's not, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I'm not guaranteeing it's going to be correct. And it does get a little frustrating. If I get to like the 4th volume and people are still correcting me, I'm just going to ignore those comments because I'm like, I've already talked about it. You guys know, sorry. If that is the make or break of you watching these reactions, I do apologize. But yeah, I appreciate it, Cool Ice Princess, of you trying to help. That's very helpful. Thank you. I will make no promises that they will be correct after reading this, but it is good to know. And then Anime Annie talks about, so yeah, Shin Yan as the narrator, I guess, and some other people have commented as well, I didn't realize that Shin was the narrator back for the donghua in the intro. It sounded like a much older man, so I thought it was like Nightmare or somebody that was narrating the intro. I didn't realize it was Shin with just a deeper booming voice narrating the intro of the donghua. I didn't realize that, so that's really cool, giving out that exposition. So I do want to make note that Anime Annie pointed out that Shen Yan, despite all of his criticism, despite all of his, this is, I think, why I like Shen as well as a protagonist, because despite all of his criticism of the system, despite all of his criticism of the novel, he did financially support and supported the official release and bought all of the chapters, bought the whole thing. And my thing is, he says he hated the story by the end, but I was talking with Anime Annie in the comments. I'm like, did he hate the story, or was he just let down by it? Because, you know, you pay all this money, you invest all this time and energy into reading it. Was it not that he hated the ending, but he was just let down by all the plot holes and everything that was messed up with it? I want to say that it's that, right? I want to say that it's that. And so this is his chance now to correct the story and make it kind of, basically Shin's getting the opportunity to kind of make it a fan fiction that he wanted it to be. Maybe he just doesn't realize that yet. And then finally, there was a question about what landmines were in that explanation, because one of the major, I'm looking over at Conspiracy Board Sama, one of the things is to like prevent landmines that break the suspension of disbelief. And I was like, what are landmines? And basically they're giant plot holes. So Anime Annie's example was the eagles in Lord of the Rings, which if you've watched or read Lord of the Rings, you will understand what we're talking about. But basically major plot holes. His goal is to fix those, which I think is going to happen throughout the story and is already happening throughout the story. So that's exciting. But yeah, I'm really intrigued by the fact that we're about halfway through after this chapter set, which is going to be fun. I'm excited to see what illustrations we get so far. We were talking about in the comments, I really like the illustrations for this novel. The illustrations, the person who's illustrating is really, really good. And I like that they've gotten different illustrators, I believe, for all three MXTX works. I think that's really appropriate because they all kind of have their own vibe. So I like that a lot. But yeah, so I apologize if I'm sniffly. Like I said, I mowed yesterday, and so all the allergies, everything is just like, ugh. I'm not sick, I promise. If I was, I wouldn't be watching. So we are going to get started with Scum Villain Self-Saving System chapters 13 through 15. So excited. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Chapter 13. Shen QingQiu had already taken his hammer. Did he intend to use his body to crush Luo Binghe? But as Shen QingQiu took in Elder Skyhammer's open arms and his pose that seemed like he was about to embrace Luo Binghe, his thoughts suddenly made several lightning-like turns, and his entire body broke out in a cold sweat. Fuck me! He's still wearing the poison-spiked armor! In that instant, Shen QingQiu completely forgot about Luo Binghe's plot armor. At the moment of truth, subconsciously, he once again moved to protect his student. Zhu Ya left his sheath. Blade flashed as bright as snow and pierced Elder Skyhammer's hulking body, but the demon had an entire body's worth of brute force and all-out effort within him, and he didn't back down even when skewered. Instead, he seemed overjoyed, relentlessly careening forward, forcing Zhu Ya to run clean through him and out his back, his face stretched out in a sinister grin. And he threw himself at Shen QingQiu. Shen QingQiu swiftly made his decision. He promptly withdrew his attack, but it was already too late. From his right arm came a stab of pains, and his heart chilled down to its depths. Skyhammer collapsed to the ground, spat out a mouthful of blood, and laughed madly. Shen QingQiu, I've taken you down with me. Ha ha ha! Worth it! It was worth it! Shizun! Luo Binghe grabbed Shen QingQiu's right hand. You've been pierced! Shen QingQiu wrenched his hand free. Oh, nothing's wrong. I wasn't pierced. Don't listen to the ravings of a blowhard. As he spoke, he glanced down and his heart was once again blotted out by a frantic scream of fuck, 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 fuck. From the back of his hand to his forearm were rows of tiny pinholes. They were already turning red. Luckily, he didn't have trypophobia. However, once Luo Binghe saw his arm, his face went completely white. No one could hear the raging waves in Shen QingQiu's heart. Motherfucker, how many times have the male lead screwed you over? You were already told that he wouldn't die, remember? He won't die. Why'd you go out of the way to rush to rescue him? Fuck! Elder Sky, I appreciate, first of all, that MXTX is not holding back with how vulgar this is, language-wise. Elder Skyhammer had finally dragged down someone with him, and it was a heavyweight. This elder has never spoken only to scare, he said gleefully, no longer even a bit depressed. If I say this poison has no cure, then it has no cure. Peak Lord Shen, sit back and await your death. A blade flashed. Luo Binghe pulled out Shuya and held it at the demon's throat, his movements so matchlessly agile that Shen QingQiu had nearly missed them. It seemed suddenly as if Luo Binghe was another person. Your people must have a cure, he said coldly. If you don't hand over the antidote, I'll definitely kill you first. Young Master Elder Skyhammer truly isn't lying, Sha Hualing interrupted. This poison is called without a cure. When it comes to humans, it indeed has no cure. The elder has lost his match and done something truly disgraceful. He knows only death awaits him. Why would he fear your threat? Without a cure? Never had less effort been put into naming a poison! Even though Shen QingQiu had read the original work and had long known about this rare poison, he couldn't help lampshading and ranting at the pragmaticism of Great Master Airplane shooting towards the sky's naming sense. Sha Hualing's eyes flashed. The sudden twist in circumstances had clearly inspired her to resume scheming something malicious. Shen QingQiu nursed no illusions about her character. He circulated his spiritual energy to suppress the continuous waves of pain and twitching in his right arm, while his lips curved in a smile, purposefully putting out a mask of effortlessness. Your words aren't wrong, but Miss Sha forgotten that I have already cultivated for many years. Having achieved mid-formation stage, can I still be considered a common person? Sha Hualing's expression tightened. However, it quickly settled again, and she laughed delicately. Whether you're common or not, I don't know. But I do know a method by which we can determine whether Senior Shen has been successfully poisoned. When a person is affected without a cure, starting from their wound, their spiritual flow becomes disconnected. This schism slowly spreads to the entire body, and in the end, not only does their spiritual chi coagulate and stagnate, so does their blood. I ask Senior Shen to unleash a spiritual blast with his right hand, and then we will understand. A spiritual blast, as the name implied, involved amassing a large amount of spiritual energy into a single point and then letting it violently explode, using the waves of spiritual energy's powerful oscillations as an attack. The effect was similar to pulling a trigger and firing a bullet or hurling a detonator. It seemed that in reality, the impact depended on the cultivation of the user. Okay, this is where Liu comes back in, right? Maybe Shen QingQiu had attempted it privately himself and had been able to achieve an effect equivalent of throwing a grenade, but now his right arm was akin to an intricate robot's whose parts had short-circuited. He nevertheless exerted himself, but his spiritual flow had been completely cut off. Damn it, how could he couldn't have been crippled just like that, right? Upon hearing the description of without a cure, Luo Binghe's lips trembled. In this moment, all the wrongs that Shen QingQiu had committed against him in the past were wiped clean from his heart. The only thing he knew with absolute clarity was that the demons had harmed his teacher to the point that he might be crippled, he might even lose his life. And all because of him. Shen QingQiu saw Luo Binghe's expression fluctuate, and he nonchalantly patted his student's head. Oh, no need to worry. Then Shen QingQiu lifted his eyes, smiling slightly. There's no harm in trying. Only I can't do this without some recompensance. Miss Sha, today you ran amok on Chongding Peak, and this one had to put up, this one has put up with it thus far. Now I've changed my mind. I can't let you come and go as you please. If I do, won't Sangkyong Mountain Sect be a laughingstock? How about we exchange a single palm strike under a contract of life and death? No matter who is injured and how, we bear all the blame ourselves. Whatever the result, we must accept it completely. Well, he couldn't show weakness now. All of Chongding Peak was depending on him, and the only available member of the older generation to support them. Sha Hualing would be too merciless to pass up the opportunity if he fell. Best case scenario, the demons would destroy Chongding Hall and then carry its nameplate and mountain gates back to the demon realm, and thereafter their sex reputation would plummet. Worst case scenario, it would be a massacre. He had no doubts that this woman was entirely capable of doing something like that. Better by far to take a desperate risk and make this one last gamble. He could totally take her out, too. Shen QingQiu hadn't noticed that unconsciously, He no longer considered the disciples around him, whether they were anxious, resolute, furious, or indecisive, to be mob characters the novel had described in scant number of words. Sha Hualing bit at her lip, incredibly torn. If Shen QingQiu hadn't really been poisoned, this exchange of blows would directly pit their spiritual strengths against each other, and she would definitely be killed. But if he was only bluffing, she missed this chance to wipe out the Changding Peak. Wouldn't she regret it for the rest of her life? Shen QingQiu calmly regarded her. His expression was neither that of anticipation nor avoidance as he awaited her decision. Luo Binghe tugged on his sleeve. Shizun, this disciple is willing to take Shizun's place and receive this strike. Shen QingQiu yanked his sleeve back, expression unchanging. In what universe is it acceptable for a master to cower behind his own disciple? Shizun was injured for this disciple's sake. Shen QingQiu glared at him. Since you know it was for your sake, then put some effort into protecting your life. Luo Binghe's heart suffered a heavy blow. He was unable to speak, but the rims of his eyes reddened. At last, Sha Hualing gritted her teeth. Then, Senior Shen, please forgive Ling Er's rudeness. Come, come, show no mercy and let fate decide who lives or dies, Shen QingQiu replied. Sha Hualing's heart thundered in her chest, and she didn't dare respond. Her fire-red figure rose with a leap, and she charged forth her snow-white, jade-like palm, billowing with potent black demonic chi. Shen QingQiu kicked Luo Binghe aside, having made his preparations. With this one strike he'd ensue, there were no winners. However, he was not sent flying by Sha Hualing's palm strike, nor did he cough up fresh blood as his body self-destructed and killed him. Roiling with killing intent, the master of Baisan Peak, whose sword had already left its sheath, without even lifting a single finger and using only spiritual energy bursting forth from his body, blasted away Sha Hualing, even as she was attacking it with her full force. After a short silence, Changding Peak boiled over. Oh, Liu Shizu left seclusion! The Baisan Peak war god has left seclusion! You demons, let's see if you can still be arrogant now! The cheers were greater than the total amount of badass poser points that Shen QingQiu had painstakingly framed up until now. A rain of tears showered down Shen QingQiu's heart. You damn show-off! Would it kill you to arrive sooner? How about you leave some badass points for me? Next, this world proved itself to truly be that of a fan service pack stallion novel. After Sha Hualing was blasted away, she let out a single delicate scream, and the gauzy red cloth draped over her body that had barely covered anything in the first place also tore to shreds, eliciting a series of alarmed cries from the onlookers. She cushioned her landing with a beautifully executed roll, propelling herself to standing in a single moment. Demons were indeed bold and unrestrained, even though her entire body was censored out. Sha Hualing wasn't ashamed in the slightest. She spitefully tore off the cloak of a subordinate beside her and carelessly threw it over herself. I underestimated you today, she said, but we'll definitely meet again in the future. Let's go! Liu Qingge sneered. Coming and going as you please, how shameless, dream on. His posture shifted and his sword, Changlong, or is it Sanglong? Soared into the sky, summoning sword glares by the hundreds and thousands, which arranged themselves into a glowing array before stabbing downward, descending like a rain and hail on the demon horde. Sha Hualing led her troops and fled while summoning a bolt of red gauze over her head, which she threw upward. Unfortunately, it simply couldn't block the fierce rain of sword glares. The red gauze was quickly pierced full of holes. On top of that, Sangchong Mountain Sect's disciples were hemming the demons in, so most of the horde suffered great injuries or were captured. Only the small heart of the group that had kept near Sha Hualing managed to escape down the mountain, thoroughly battered and humiliated. After returning his sword to his sheath, Liu Qingge turned stone-faced to examine the condition of the wound on Shen QingQiu's arm. The Changding Peak disciples also came to surround them, more than 10 faces, all filled with the same anxious expression. Shen QingQiu sighed. It was definitely the right decision to send Ying Ying to copy Zhu Yi and pound on the wall of Lingji Caves, wailing until you came out. Oh! Who's Zhu Yi? Asked Liu Qingge. The world's greatest beauty. Ha! Said Shen QingQiu. How am I? Liu Binghe humphed. You won't die for now. Though he said this, he didn't stop sending spiritual energy into Shen QingQiu's body through his left hand, and his expression became increasingly grave. Shen QingQiu looked at his hand, and then Luo Binghe emphatically clarified, I'm repaying my debt from Lingxi Caves. So damn tsundere! His plan to recruit Luo Binghe as a teammate had promise. But the meridians of Shen QingQiu's entire body subsequently underwent a series of convulsions, and he was unable to smile. Liu Shizu, does the poison without a cure truly have no cure? Luo Binghe asked. Liu Binghe glanced at him, but before he could answer, Shen QingQiu's knees wobbled, and he almost fell to a kneel. Luckily, Luo Binghe had been supporting him the entire time. But Shen QingQiu really couldn't stand anymore. He waved his hands. Oh, let me lie down. Let me lie down for a while. Luo Binghe had never seen Shen QingQiu so weak. He knelt beside Shen QingQiu with bloodshot eyes, choking on sobs. Shizun. With great difficulty, Shen QingQiu lifted an arm and patted Gege's head like he'd always wanted to. Oh. The mouthful of fresh blood he'd been holding back finally spilled falteringly forth. Even if it was going to be like this, he persisted and tenaciously offered a crucial line to farm more favor. I knew that you'd definitely win. I'm glad that was actually the head pat, that the thing was not only real in the donghua, but in this as well. And it wasn't just fan service on the donghua's behalf. So when he said up there, what did he say there? He basically said, Zhu Yi, until you came out, says, a nickname for actress Wang Lin, after the character she played in the Chinese soap opera Romance in the Rain. One of her famous scenes involves her banging on the door to confront the girl who stole her fiancé. Oh, so Shen's making like a real world joke, and Liu's like, I don't know what this reference is. Okay. Upon hearing this, a tremor traveled through Luo Binghe's entire body. A tremor, you say? Thinking about it afterward, Shen QingQiu concluded that if he'd been looking at this from an omniscient reader's point of view, he'd have had an outburst, smashing the book down and cursing, the fuck is with this character, huh? Hurting him one moment and saving him the next? He's messed up in the head, multiple personalities, nut job! At this time, the system sent a notification. Shen QingQiu's character complexity rating, plus 20. Character depth rating, plus 20. Character suspense rating, plus 10. Total B points, plus 50. Shen QingQiu was horrified. This was how character depth was calculated? Also, please don't randomly create strange point types. Thank you. His vision going dark, Shen QingQiu lifted his head, and he thought he saw Luo Binghe's tears falling from his eyes like pearls. He had to be mistaken. That was his last thought before he lost consciousness. Oh, Shen, how do you not realize? How do you not see it? No, he was crying for you. Shen, how do you go? You think you're just gaining sympathy points, but Shen. What you doing? What you doing? We've got things to talk about, but we're going to go through the next part. Ooh, part 3. Okay. Part 3, favor points. Oh, chapter 3. Part 3, favor points, chapter 14. After sleeping for an unknown length of time, Shen QingQiu finally awoke, more dead than alive. Opening his eyes to the sight of the familiar white gauzy curtains above his head, he knew he was on Qingjing Peak in his quiet and peaceful residence. He took a deep breath, wanting to stretch, when he suddenly realized the door had opened and someone had entered. Ming Fan held a tray in both hands. Seeing Shen QingQiu awake, he dropped the tray on the table and started to bawl, "Oh, Shizun, you're finally awake!" Another person was still standing outside. Luo Binghe lingered by the entrance like he wanted to come in, yet he hesitated. Ming Fan sobbed for a while, soaking a large patch on the bedsheet, before turning over his shoulder. "Why are you standing here? Don't you know that seeing you annoys Shizun?" he rebuked Luo Binghe. Then he said to Shen QingQiu, "I don't know what's wrong with that kid. He insisted on planting himself there like some kind of stick. He won't leave no matter how much he shooed away." Shen QingQiu waved his hand. "No matter. Let him. I will go get Liu Shishu, and Zongman Shibo, and Mu Shishu, Mingfan said. They said to alert them as soon as you woke up. After saying this, he scrambled to his feet and rushed outside. It seemed to Shen QingQiu that he'd slept for a very long time. Yu Qingyan had already returned. As for Mu Shishu, that had to be Shan Cao's Peaks Mu Qingfeng. MXTX, what are we doing with this? Chan Sao Peaks Mu Qingfeng. Chow Sao Peak specialized in medication and was proficient in the healing arts, so his presence made absolute sense. Luo Binghe let Mingfan pass, but even after Mingfan had gone a distance, he wouldn't leave his spot. He only stared fixedly into the room, his fists clenched tightly the entire time. Shen QingQiu spoke up, slowly. Do you have something to say? Then come in. Luo Binghe complied and entered the room. With a sudden thump, he fell to his knees before the bed. Shen QingQiu stared at him in alarm. Wait a moment, system. What's going on? All I did was sleep for a bit. How did things end up like this? How long have I been asleep for? Is it like 10 years in the future or something? From his kneel, Luo Binghe raised his head, gaze fervent and full of guilt. Shizun, please forgive this disciple's foolishness and ignorance up until now. Foolish and ignorance? You could describe a lot of people with those words, but certainly not Luo Binghe, right? Originally, this disciple was under the impression that Shizun didn't care about him at all. Only after the third match did I understand what painstaking efforts Shizun had put in. No. Your original master really didn't care about you, Shen QingQiu thought desperately. He earnestly wished you dead, really. Although exactly what painstaking efforts of mine have you noticed? Say it out loud. I'm very curious to know. Oh my God. But Luo Binghe did not continue speaking on this topic. He only said, entirely earnest, from this day forth, this disciple will devote himself to carrying out his duty and serving Shizun with all his heart, obeying only Shizun's esteemed commands. Shen QingQiu studied him with a complicated expression. All that past mistreatment and abuse, completely forgotten because he saved Luo Binghe once? Weren't these favor points a little too easy to farm? To no surprise, at the time, he was unable to understand the course of Luo Binghe's thoughts with their hundreds and thousands of twists and turns. Shen QingQiu was silent for a moment. As long as you understand, first, why don't you get up? He still didn't understand this in the slightest. Binghe, what exactly did you realize? He watched Luo Binghe slowly stand, yet the boy remained unwilling to leave. Instead, he seemed bashful, as if there was something he wanted to say. Is there something else? Shen QingQiu asked. Shizun has slept for many days and only just woke up, said Luo Binghe. I was wondering, do you perhaps have an appetite? In truth, strictly speaking, Shen QingQiu had long held himself in a state of anedia. Even if he didn't eat, he would be fine, but he was unable to resist his nature, which craved good food. Oh, he's a foodie! Yay! As soon as he heard there were things to eat, his eyes shone with desire. Oh, quite a bit, very much so. Luo Binghe dashed off to the kitchen. For the past few days, every couple of hours, he remade a serving of congee. Now it could finally be put to use. After bringing the congee to the table, still steaming hot, Luo Binghe helped Shen QingQiu sit up on the bed so solicitous it made the hair on the back of one's nape stand up. He came just short of spoon-feeding Shen QingQiu, and a streak of goosebumps ran down Shen QingQiu's forearms. He ate a few mouthfuls using the ladle himself, all the while Luo Binghe remained standing by his bedside, silently watching him. Shen QingQiu thought for a moment when he was hit by sudden realization. Oh, it's quite good, he said, reservedly offering a few words of praise. It wasn't just quite good. Even Qingjing's peaks names, Clear and Tranquil, told you that this branch tended towards the fresh and light, and the style of their cooks followed the same principle. After eating their food for so long, Shen QingQiu's taste buds had become as dull as dishwater. Even though the bowl in his hands was full of mere congee, perhaps it was an issue of ingredients and techniques, but compared to the watery, meager congee he'd had recently, it was on an entirely different level. Snow-white congee rice, finely chopped scallions, delicious minced pork, and shredded ginger in just the right amount, it all at the perfect temperature. It had been too long. Shen QingQiu's body wanted nothing but to weep. At this praise, Luo Binghe's eyes shone. If Shuzun likes it, may I give it to him every day with variations? Shen QingQiu choked on the spot. Luo Binghe rushed to pat his back. Shen QingQiu waved him off, expressing that he was fine. He was only a little shocked. Luo Binghe's excellent cooking skills were his foremost lady-killing technique. Oh! Shen QingQiu had never thought that he would have the rare honor to eat as only a few key harem members in the original work got to. Cuisine a la Luo Binghe. Ah! Okay, even more shocking was that line. Ah, that line. This one. I'll give it to you every day with variations. Oh my God! What? No! No! That is not how we're taking that line. We ain't talking about cooking. Well, we were talking about cooking, but we're not talking about food. Well, we're talking about food, but we're not talking about... It's not the meat that you think we're talking about. Oh my God. Oh, wasn't that what Luo Binghe had used to coax several young spoiled girls into willingly and ecstatically entering his harem? Oh! Eating whatever you want is fine, but saying whatever you want is not! As Shen QingQiu's expression had grown strange, Luo Binghe was slightly uneasy. Oh, Shizun dislikes the food, he asked. You made me free food. Whoever disliked that would be an idiot. Yes! Shen QingQiu said amiably. This master likes it very much. From today onward, I'll leave this to you. Oh, we're going to talk about this scene so much. We're going to talk about this scene so much. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Finally, he didn't need to resign himself to eating that insubstantial watery fare. As the oh-so-mighty changing peak lord, why didn't he have the privilege of a private kitchen? Having received approval, Luo Binghe once again blossomed like a spring flower. Shen QingQiu watched him bloom, and without knowing why his hand suddenly twitched, wanting to pat that head again. Was it possible that Binghe's head had a special magnetic field? That would explain why he couldn't control himself. Oh, Shen, no, you like Luo. You're attracted to him. How can you not realize this, sweetheart? Why not? After sending a happily beaming Luo Binghe away, returning his goodwill by using him as hard labor, Shen QingQiu called on the system. Is the scenario at the end of the endless abyss unavoidable? He asked. If Luo Binghe fails to complete the endless abyss scenario, 10,000 satisfaction points will be deducted, said the system. Upon hearing that number, Shen QingQiu once again, out of habit, spat up a fountain of blood. Afterwards, he wiped his mouth. He'd spat out so much blood that he was used to it at this point. This was eminently logical. If Luo Binghe wasn't shoved into the endless abyss, then he wouldn't be able to activate his golden finger. If the protagonist couldn't be overpowered, then where was the satisfaction? Oh, so he doesn't get the golden... Oh, so the golden finger doesn't activate until he's thrown into the abyss. Okay. Therefore, the endless abyss scenario was unavoidable. As this novel's number one loser, number one scum villain, the execution of this glorious task naturally, absolutely, inescapably fell to Shen QingQiu. Interesting. So it has to be him that does it. In the donghua, I was questioning whether it would be somebody else, but it has to be him. Yet, unwilling to resign himself to this fate, Shen QingQiu asked again and ended up sighing, still unable to completely give up. Luo Binghe, who was currently like a little sun, was destined to fall and become that brooding, cold-blooded demon youth. Even a transmigrator like Shen QingQiu, who by all rights ought to have access to cheat powers, wasn't able to change this inevitability. He had been designated to be the man who threw the protagonist into the endless abyss, thereby catalyzing his overpowered legendary journey. This job opportunities for growth was really terrible. If Shen QingQiu failed to do this, he would lose 10,000 satisfaction points. He couldn't become more thoroughly dead than that. But if he did do this, once Luo Binghe activated his golden finger, he definitely wouldn't let him off. The work was difficult, the pay was meager, the benefits were non-existent. What the hell was up with this? Luo Binghe hadn't left for long when several of Shen QingQiu's sex siblings came to visit. Shen QingQiu lay on the bed, reading a novel hidden inside a copy of the THEORIZIng, which I'm going to look down here and see. The Dao, more commonly known as the Dao Jing, a famous classical text on the philosophy and religion of Taoism by Laozi. When Yu Qingyong entered, he shut the book without missing a beat so that the novel was tucked inside, with the Dao Jing's cover proudly exposed. He tried to get off the bed, but Yu Qingyong hurriedly stopped him. So wait, what was the novel hidden inside the copy? Was it smut? What was inside of that? We don't know yet. And don't move so carelessly, he cautioned. You shouldn't leave the bed just yet. Just keep lying down. Yu Jingho turned behind him to Mu Qingfang. Mu Shidi, come take another look. While Shen QingQiu was unconscious, Mu Qingfang had already diagnosed him and provided treatment. This visit was likely to further prognosis. Shen QingQiu held out his wrist. I'm troubling Mu Shidi, he said politely. Mu Qingfang startled briefly, but he nodded, sitting by the bed and putting his fingers on Shen QingQiu's pulse. With his medical expertise as the Peak Lord of Shan Sao Peak, no matter how complicated the case, he needed only an instant to make a diagnosis and provide a prescription. But he conscientiously remained there for a long while before finally removing his fingers, his expression solemn. How is he? Yu Qingyong asked. As the patient in question, Shen QingQiu showed no restraint. So can this poison be cured or not? Liu Qingge shook out his sleeves, sitting next to a table with a hump. Oh, I love it. It's just like the donghua. It's called Without a Cure. What do you think? Shen QingQiu sighed. Then, Mushidi, you might as well tell me. How many years do I have left? How many months? How many days? Mu Qingfang shook his head. Even though it's without a cure, its effects can be suppressed. His voice was even, neither quiet nor loud, but Shen QingQiu felt like he'd hit the jackpot. Even though this poison was called Without a Cure, in truth there was a remedy. In the original work, at the Immortal Alliance Conference, with its twist after twist, a lovable, graceful, and subdued little Shime from another sect was hit by this rare poison. However, importantly, she was the protagonist's woman. Was there ever a stallion novel where the male lead let his own woman be poisoned to death? If there was, then he'd be a subpar wish fulfillment protagonist. And that would be a shitty failure of a stallion novel. Oh, the cure was incredibly simple. Let us review the developments in the original work. Due to the irresistible power of the plot, in order to save the male lead, whom she'd known for less than 2 hours, this graceful little Shime let herself be hit by a demon's underhanded trick, and the poison contaminated her body. Luo Binghe felt an absolute obligation to save her, and therefore he took on the burden of looking for a cure for the graceful little Shime. It just so happened that deep within the mountains where the Immortal Alliance Conference was being held, there grew a mythical 1,000-year-old flower. Oh, okay, sorry. Shen QingQiu had already forgotten exactly what the name was of whatever flower, whatever leaf, because the number of mythical flowers in Proud Immortal Demon Way outnumbered in at least the hundreds. Every single one was at least 1,000 years old, and when you added all the mythical grasses and mythical trees, who the hell could remember all those names? Airplane shooting towards the sky. Do you think mythical flowers are like Chinese cabbages on sale? Leave the mythical flowers at least a little of the dignity that comes with being rare and precious. Yeah! Luo Binghe was sure that this legendary flower would cure the poison within the graceful Shime's body. He put a tremendous amount of effort into picking it for her. Just doing that took 3 days, or 30 chapters. Oh my god! For those 3 days, they journeyed to pick the flower while fighting monsters and through exchanging flirtatious glances, and developed a deep sense of camaraderie. Oh, by the time Luo Binghe finally managed to pick the flower, the graceful Shime's condition had worsened, her entire body fragile and devoid of strength. The two of them were overjoyed, and they hurried to let the graceful Shime eat the rare flower, raw. However, it was ineffective. The poison wasn't cured, and their hearts sank. The girl thought, since I'm about to die, I must leave behind some memories to ensure that my life won't have been in vain. I don't have many days left after all, so I won't suppress my feelings anymore. Then, using her weak and fragile body, she pushed Luo Binghe down. Oh my god! Luo Binghe put up a brief show of resistance before telling himself, she did it all for my sake. I don't have the heart to reject her final wish. He yielded, still half reluctant, and went along with it. And then in the end, how was the poison cured? After the down and dirty scene, the girl's poison was naturally cured. Was it ridiculous? Cliche? Implausible? But it was satisfying, right? Ridiculously satisfying. So ridiculously satisfying. Oh my God! What is this setting up? Oh, we're going to talk about this. Don't you worry. Look, after Luo Binghe was of both human and demon blood, right? And the demon half of his bloodline came from their number one saintly ruler, from the heavenly demons of old. A wee little demonic poison wasn't even strong enough to get stuck between Luo Binghe's teeth. And he instantly absorbed and digested it during their, you know. Incidentally, he even absorbed the nutrients of the mythical flower that the girl had just eaten, so his martial ability once again made progress. Shit! Oh, okay. The so-called chapter 15. I'm still like, I'm processing. So the so-called protagonist privilege was that even if he stepped in dog shit, there would probably be a hidden scroll or elixir within it. As Shen QingQiu thought back on this segment of Proud Immortal Demon Way, his facial expression kept changing erratically. He failed to notice even when the others addressed him. Yo Qingzhong had repeatedly called his name many times before he finally returned himself. What? Mu Qingfang passed him a piece of paper. Every month, take these 4 medications and circulate your entire energy, spiritual energy, with someone who has high quantities of it. This will assist you in maintaining regular spiritual circulation. If you do these things, then there shouldn't be any problems. He paused for a moment. The only thing is, I'm afraid that from today onward, Shen QingQiu, occasionally your spiritual chi will at times suddenly stagnate, or you may suffer other abnormalities in your circulation. The other 3 people in the room all paid close attention to his expression. One must remember that to cultivators, the stagnation of spiritual circulation was a profoundly terrifying problem, especially if it cropped up during a duel between expert practitioners where a single slip-up could mean your life, or, you know, between, like, man-eating spiders. That's where we got the donghua. Little did they know that Shen QingQiu was immensely satisfied with this result. For somebody in a scum villain role to be poisoned with something like without a cure and still be able to live, it was giving him too much confidence. Like, he knew that going at it with the protagonist could have cured the poison, but like he could do that. Could he? Oh my God! You thought about it! You thought about it! You're questioning it! It could happen! Oh! You, Qingshang sighed. Had I known any of this would come to pass, I would have not left the mountain. Shen QingQiu is questioning whether or not he can have sex with Luo Binghe to cure his poison, and meanwhile the dare officer's like, if only I hadn't gone. I'm like, oh my God! Shen QingQiu thought his tone was too solemn. The Immortal Alliance Conference has always been a massive event that the various sect leaders must work together to organize. He hurried to say, how could you not have gone, Xingzhang? This happened due to the demon's underhanded deceits and my own carelessness. You must not hold yourself responsible. If he didn't say this clearly here, given Yu Qingzhang's personality, he might never have left the mountain ever again. He'd stay and defend Shangzhong Mountain sect to his last. That was all entirely possible. To his surprise, Mu Qingfang also guiltily declared, no, the fault is all mine. If I hadn't failed to realize that there was a demonic invasion, and if my skill weren't too poor to fully cure Shen QingQiu, then it wouldn't have come to this either. No, this has nothing to do with you two, Shen QingQiu insisted. Come to think of it, I was a bit indelicate and smashed a giant hole in the ground before Zhongding Hall with that hammer. The 3 of them had devolved into jumbled apologizing and blame-taking that seemed both chaotic and comical. It left Shen QingQiu both touched and embarrassed, his entire body breaking out in goosebumps and his scalp going numb. Liu Qingge stared out the window, his face expressionless. He waited until they had exhausted themselves, and finally took a sip of tea and said, this matter must remain secret to all but the 12 Peak Lords. If outsiders became aware that the Peak Lord of Shangzhong Mountain sect's second peak had suddenly taken a deadly weakness, things would be unfun, to say the least. All 3 of the others naturally understood this. Do you think that the burden of Peak Lord will be too heavy, QingQiu? Asked Yu Qingyang. The original Shen QingQiu would most likely have suspected that Yu Qingyang was trying to undermine his authority or something of that sort. However, the current Shen QingQiu knew that Yu Qingyang was genuinely worried about him overworking himself and damaging his health, and he rushed to respond. Zhang Min Xizhang, really, do not worry about me anymore. I haven't been crippled to that extent, he smiled. For now, my hands, feet, and mouth still work, and I still have my cultivation. I am extremely satisfied. Then they discussed a variety of details of the demon invasion before Yu Qingyang and Mu Qingfang took their leave. Shen QingQiu watched them go, thinking it all terribly funny. Yet he also felt an unutterable warmth and peace. Even though his fellow disciples' personalities were all different, with some easy to get along with, some difficult, they all breathed as one. Though split into 12 peaks, whenever something went wrong, they were a dependable family, except the original Shen QingQiu. Liu Qingge put down his tea, which had long gone ice cold. If it weren't for your body's lack of ghostly qi, I definitely would suspect that you'd been possessed. And the one who remained just happened to be one of the difficult ones. On a certain level, your guess is very correct. Liu Qingge continued, you saved me in the Lingqi caves. That in itself was inconceivable. During the demon attack, you also rescued some nameless disciple and almost lost your life. You were poisoned to the point of damaging your spiritual energy levels, and you should be furious, yet you've peacefully accepted it. Someone else doing so wouldn't be so strange, but you doing it so upturns everything. Shen QingQiu absolutely did not want to discuss the issues of his own out-of-character personality with Luo Qingge. He called Mingfan to refresh the tea and then leaned back and smiled. Nameless. That's only for now. That disciple of yours, his base is indeed excellent, Liu Qingge said. However, a fair number with his level and aptitude are invited into large sects every year, and in the end, the number who can truly become outstanding is less than 1 in 10,000. Shen QingQiu suddenly sensed danger. What if Liu Qingge became a stumbling block on Luo Binghe's journey to become overpowered, and during a confrontation between the two of them, was KO'd in a snap? For everyone's sake, he needed to warn Liu Qingge. Believe me, he said patiently, earnestly, this disciple of mine will definitely be a success. I hope that when Liu Shide has a chance, you can give him a little support and guidance as often as possible. Mingfan was half dead from depression. He'd only come to refresh the tea, yet he'd been forced to hear Shen QingQiu, his ally in torturing a shared enemy, heap praise after praise upon Luo Binghe. The level of frustration he felt was akin to that of the confidant who for years always cursed the little bastard with you suddenly went and coupled up with the same little bastard you tormented together. Repulsed, he immediately decided to go be repulsive to others. A stormy Mingfan found Luo Binghe in the kitchen, pondering over what food to make Shen QingQiu the next morning. Mingfan showered him with verbal abuse before issuing a series of commands. Well, go chop some wood. Chop 80 bundles. Fill the entire woodshed. Fetch water. The waters and jars in our room are empty. Are you blind? Can't you see? But Xizhang, if the woodshed is full, where will I sleep? Luo Binghe asked, perplexed. Mingfan stomped his foot, spittle flying everywhere. Well, isn't it flat in here? Isn't the floor enough? I just filled the water jars in your room today. Well, that water isn't fresh anymore. Redo it. Refill them all. In the past, some grievance and bitterness might have sprouted in Luo Binghe's heart, but today his attitude was completely different. In his eyes, these were all training opportunities. He already had such a good teacher, one who thought of everything for him, who was even willing to sacrifice his own life for him, right? What training could he not overcome? What suffering could he not withstand? Luo Binghe didn't say another word. He turned on his heel to get ready to work. Mingfan could not derive not even a little satisfaction from his reaction, and instead he felt even more frustrated. He stormed away while cursing. I really can't understand. What about that brat caught Shizun's eye? For Shizun to suddenly see him in a new light. A success, outstanding, even if that brat has bewitched Shizun with some potion. Liu Shizhu won't guide or support him. Unthinkable. Bah! Though Mingfan cursed unceasingly as he went, his voice wasn't loud. But how could Luo Binghe, with his blindingly fast progress and naturally sharp 5 senses, not hear? Mingfan's mutterings were largely harsh words and phrases, but in his mind, but in the midst, he touched on those key words. And in an instant, Luo Binghe took those bits and pieces to guess most of the whole picture. So Shizun had actually spoken about him like that in front of Liu Shishu. The feeling of having someone speak about you so highly somewhere you couldn't see, that feeling was truly indescribably wonderful. Warmth suddenly surged in Luo Binghe's heart. The more it surged, the stronger it became, gradually flowing through his entire body. Luo Binghe felt like a steady strength had taken root somewhere in the depths of his heart and was starting to bud. Even in his hand carrying the wooden bucket seemed to become stronger. At this time, not only did Luo Binghe not feel like other people were making things difficult for him, his expression became joyful and satisfied. If Shen QingQiu were there, he would definitely have suspected that within the depths of his heart. Luo Binghe was actually an extreme masochist. Oh no! However, Shen QingQiu was astoundingly oblivious to the fact that thanks to the divine wingman abilities of his useless teammate Mingfan, Luo Binghe's favor had again risen to a new high. For the time being, Shen QingQiu was lying down in elation. That day, the always lofty Qingjing's Peak's doorstep almost broke from all the feet rushing across it. The various peak lords all brought their disciples to visit along with gifts of condolence. After all, during Sha Waling's armed provocation, the rainbow bridges had been severed and the Qiangding Peak had been sealed by a barrier. They had been unable to intervene, and so the burden of the fight had fallen on Shen QingQiu, who had been the sole representative of the older generation. Anyhow, Sangchong Mountain hadn't lost too much face. But no matter whether their past relationship had been good or bad, the peak lords absolutely had to come to express the proper sentiments. Shen QingQiu calmly received their greetings and used the chance to learn of the faces of several peak lords he hadn't yet met, while also taking the opportunity to make some small talk and strengthen his relationships. That night, he was on cloud 9 as he thought, finally, I can have a peaceful night's sleep. However, 4 hours later, peaceful night's sleep my ass! Shen QingQiu stood in the middle of a stretch of chaotic nothingness and stared out at the endless horizon. He'd definitely just been drunk on satisfied smiles, comfortably sinking into sleep on his bed. So could someone explain why he'd been dragged into this space? Shen QingQiu really wished that he had a gong, one that he could ring to summon the system, so he wouldn't need always to yell at the top of his lungs within his mind, "System, are you online?" The system provides you with 24-hour service. Where is this? What system? What's the situation? This is a world within a dream realm. Of course I know this is a dream realm, said Shen QingQiu. Tell me, how could such an abstract scenery exist in reality? I'm asking why I'm here. Come on, he thought. Please don't let it be what I'm thinking. But this world really wouldn't give him a break. Just as he thought, don't. In the next second, he saw a figure that was unbearably familiar. Luo Binghe stood before him, bewildered in the middle of a never-ending wasteland. He also seemed entirely lost as to why he'd appeared here. After a moment of bewilderment, Shen QingQiu's form came into his view. Luo Binghe startled, and then he dashed over happily with like a chick who'd seen its mother hen. What kind of shitty analogy was that? Shizun! Luo Binghe had already been trapped in this world for a long time. He was instantly excited by the sight of Shen QingQiu and called him repeatedly again and again. As soon as Shen QingQiu laid eyes on him, he recognized this place and what scenario he had been thrust into. Instantly, all of Shen QingQiu's hopes turned to dust, and even as a shower of tears rained down on his heart, he patted Luo Binghe's shoulder. I heard you. No need to call me so many times. Yes, Shizun, Luo Binghe said hurriedly. Why are you here too? Do you know where we are? Being lazy, Shen QingQiu directly echoed the system's line. This is a world within a dream realm. Then why am I here? Luo Binghe asked. Anyone else being here is the strange thing. While your presence is quite natural, said Shen QingQiu. This is your dream realm. Oh my god! Okay. No big deal. We're just gonna break this down. Oh my god. There are lots of things to talk about in these chapters, and as I was reading, I was like, I was like, I want to keep talking about this, but I don't want to stop and like ruin the flow of the story. But I was just like, oh, we didn't clarify this in the donghua. We didn't talk about this secret flower. We didn't talk about all this business. I could see why with the censorship this series goes through. I could see why, but I'm like, oh wait, what? What now? That's the thing about the donghua, is that even though, like, reading these chapters, I was so looking forward to the Liu and Shen showdown in the room when he wakes up, because that's one of my favorite scenes, I think, in the donghua season 1, is that showdown, because Liu's expressions, he's so serious, and I love how that translates to the page, like him just being like, the idea of the tea going ice cold, where he's just like, okay, what's going on? Like, I love that characterization, that they use the tea being ice cold to like translate to how Liu is. I'm glad that he translates so well on the page, and that's why I kind of like watching the donghua first, because it gives you insight into these characters, what they look like, even if their appearance changes, like with Luo and the curly hair. You get kind of like a base image in your head of how they look. And then you're like, oh yeah, and so you can kind of picture it better. That's why I like watching the donghua first before getting into the story. And so I knew what was happening in these chapters, and it just gets like elaborated and expanded on a little bit. It feels like we're going kind of at a glacier pace, but I know things are going to pick up. Like next week, we're going to be in the dream realm, which we're next week going to be looking at 4 chapters, actually, 16, 17, 18, and 19. So I'm assuming that those 4 chapters are going to cover the dream realm, cover the rest of that episode next week. So that, I think we'll get through it, and then we'll be on track with the Congress for the rest of the book. So exciting. But even when stuff was kind of drug out in this chapter set, we got so many like little extra things that I was like, oh, okay. That's good to know. So where we start at, I want to go back to how many points we started out at from this chapter set. And I think it was like, what did we have last week? What did we end on? So hold on. I'm going to actually pull a couple things up. I want to see the chapter titles from Discord, so I want to pull that up as well. I'm also going to go back and see where we ended at on last week on our B points, because I should have wrote that down, and I neglected to do so. So we're going to go back and actually, I'm going to pull up the last video from last week and just see where we ended up at. Where did we end up at? Oh, 1,045. We had a lot of B points. So we're going to put up here the B points from last week, which was 1,045 is where we started at. At first, whenever the system was like, in the donghua, the system's like, oh, if you don't do the abyss track, you're gonna lose 1,000 B points. I was like, oh, we've got 1,045, so he doesn't technically have to do that. But no, in this version, it's not so good. In this version, it's not so good. So I was like, uh-oh. So I want to go back to because it's 10,000 points. So yeah, there's no chance. So chapter 13, suffering by pretending to be badass, or pretending to be B. So chapter 13 is literally Shen suffering, but he's trying to be badass, trying to be all stoic and everything. All right, that's what he does. Good to note. Chapter 14 is vulgar settings. Yep, we're going to talk about that. And then chapter 15 is Dream Demon's script. So yeah, interestingly enough, we've got the dream sequence and how that's all going. All right. Cool. So yeah, there's 30 chapters in this book. So we just finished chapter 15, which technically puts us at the halfway point, right? So that's good to know. We do get one picture out of this, which is an amazing picture. I really loved it. It was the very start of this chapter set, and it's of Shen getting pierced by the poison. And oh my gosh, the expressions and everything is so good there. And you could just see Shen's expression of like, fuck. Damn it. Why did I do that? Why did I step in front of him? He was going to be okay. Here's the other thing that this picture reminds me of. And that's the fact that Luo is like only 15 or 16 at this point. I think maybe he's 16 or 17 at this point, and he's still young. So a lot of these things are quite formidable with Luo's character. Now, here's my thing. I wondered, because, you know, we've talked about this previously about the age difference and how some people are kind of put off. They don't like Luo and Shen together because of their age difference, and I get that. My whole thing has been that here's my thing with it all. I'm usually that type of person that I cannot stand like someone that's older trying to be in a relationship with somebody that's super young. That's definitely a turnoff for me. It's like, ugh, gross. How dare you? And I think if Shen was trying to do that, it would be one thing. But Shen is absolutely oblivious to what is going on. 100 times oblivious. He does not understand what's happening. So, with that in mind, and we're going to talk about that a little bit when we get to the flower part. We're going to talk about that. But I feel like Shen's so oblivious, and he's just like, I don't know what's going on. That it's okay to me. He's not actively trying to hit on Luo. It's just unconscious. It's just happening, and he doesn't realize it. Now, we cut to so many years later when Luo is a full-blown adult. Then if they try to pursue a relationship. But the thing about it is, I don't consider it. I could see maybe some people saying that it's grooming on Shen's part, but I don't think that it is. Shen's just being nice. He's just being selfless and nice. And it's just the fact that Luo has been so abused all his life. He's taking this kindness and compassion and just really taking it to heart. But it's not like Shen's trying to impress anything upon him. Now, granted, he is trying to satisfy him because he doesn't want to die, but he's not actively trying to change who Luo is necessarily, rather than just, he's like, if I'm nice to this guy, maybe he won't kill me later. Right? It kind of reminds me of, is it Happy? No, it's not Happy Gilmore. It's the Adam Sandler movie where he goes back to school. Oh my gosh, I can't think of that movie's name. He goes back to school and he's like a kid in school, but there's like this one character that Steve Buscemi plays, and he ends up being like a mass murderer, and he comes and like kills all these other people, but he leaves Adam Sandler's character alone because he was nice to him. That's literally what I think Shen is trying to do. At this point, Shen has no clue that he really likes Luo. There's one moment where he considers it, and then he's like, what's that? It's like the one light bulb that gets like flickered for a hot second, but then that's it. And then the rest of the time, he's just trying to save himself. He's like, as long as I get on this guy's good side, I'm going to be fine. But what he doesn't realize is while he's trying to get on his good side and save himself, it is having much deeper ramifications in the maze of misunderstanding, or the fog of massive misunderstandings that Luo is going through. Oh my God. So let's talk about it. And my dogs are being most aggravated that I have ignored them. How dare I do such things? And so they're going to be pressing me to play with them. So you'll apologize ahead of time. Go away. Go lay down. Anyway, one thing about this book is that MXTX does not hold back with the swearing, especially with Shen. Shen very much acts like, I feel like with Modao Zushi and Heaven Official's Blessing, they're still in this Chinese fantasy world. So even though they drop an F-bomb occasionally or say damn it or something like that, it's not as prolific because I guess that's just the time and the culture and the place. But here, because Shen is from modern times and people don't care so much about cursing necessarily, especially younger audiences, it's not considered as formal. He just drops that F-bomb like it's nothing, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't think I've said the F word this much in a single setting in my entire life than I have in this one chapter set. I was like, damn, I've said this. I don't usually drop the F-bomb, so I say it like so many times in this chapter. It's so crazy, right? But yeah, so again, Shen, he realizes too late that he was trying to save Luo. And he's like, you're told he won't die. Why did you rush to go to rescue him? And you could argue at this point that it wasn't necessarily because he loves Luo, because Shen has no clue. He does not realize it yet, just how head over heels he is. But it also speaks for Shen Yan, that Shen Yan is genuinely a nice person. And he does care about these characters. Like, he actively has saved Liu. He's already decided he doesn't want to kill Yu Qingyan. So he's like, I don't want to kill these people. I don't want to do that. So he's naturally a nice guy. And it's just in his nature to be kind and do that. And so he's just like, even though he knows that Luo has plot armor and he's not going to get hurt, he still goes out of his way to try to save him. And I think that speaks so much for how his character actually is. And why I think that Luo will end up loving him, because he's such a nice person. And I kind of like that we're setting up here. So we have the OG. We'll do OG versus new on here. Now, in the new version, and that marker is not showing up great, so we're going to go back to blue. OG versus new. In the new version, we have Shen ends up being poisoned. Whereas that does not happen in the OG version. So we're going to put not available here. Or we're going to talk about it a little bit down here. I'm going to leave a little spot open for that, right? But I like that we have this idea that Shen, and I'm going to just put Shen Yan here, that this version of him is kind and is compassionate, right? He's a diva, he's a peacock, but he's not selfish. He's a nice person. He's just actually a good character. And then Luo, we'll put him here, is someone that is very emotionally driven. The thing that's so crazy about it is that in the OG version, it was that Luo, we put him up here, Luo had no affection from his sect except for Ning Ying Ying, and so he got that affection from his harem and everyone he invited. So in the original story, it's like he didn't have any support from his sect aside from Ning, and so he just basically, every woman that came to his foot that was like, oh, please let me in your sect, he's like, oh, of course, absolutely. And while you're here, since it's a male stallion fantasy, let's just get it on. And it's like, okay, and we'll talk about the whole flavors of the day. Oh my God, this chapter, MXTX, what are you doing? I know what you're doing, but oh my God, but we'll get to that. Whereas in the new one, because Shen is showing affection, because he is showing affection and kindness, that it's like Luo doesn't need the harem. He doesn't need the harem of women with him. Which, you know, he may still end up getting a support network of female cultivators, but they may not be like romantic interests for him. They just may be like a platonic ally system that he has with him, right? Just a big troop of beards just helping him out, you know? That may be what it ends up instead, because he can devote all of his affection. Basically, Luo has enough affection for hundreds of women. He has enough love inside of him for hundreds of women, or one Shen QingQiu. And I don't think Shen realizes that. I don't think Shen has put that together at all. He's not even fathoming it. It's not even on the forefront of his mind. It's not even in the dark recesses of his mind. But we know Luo has enough love in his heart to spread across to hundreds of women, but he's going to concentrate all of that to just Shen QingQiu. All right. All right. All righty then. Interesting. And I thought about the whole, like, the younger protagonist versus, like, the relationships, because in Mode Azushi, it's not a thing, because they're, like, literally the same age. It's not a thing. That part, they're fine. In Heaven Official's Blessing, the only thing I can say without spoiling is that the protagonist is a little bit older than Hua Chong, but there's not that much age difference, and in the story, the age is not a factor. It doesn't become anything by the end of it. So it's like, eh. So that part's not even a problem. So in this one, this is only the one that you kind of have to go, well, he doesn't really love Luo right now while he's a kid. And the Shen Yan that's taking over the body is technically in his early 20s. So there isn't that much of an age difference, but it is an age difference. But once they're adults, it won't be a thing. And we just go from there. That's how I can tolerate it right now. Because if he was actively trying to pursue him and be kind of sleazy with it, then I'd be like, oh, that's not good. But there's only one instance where he kind of like, there's like a flicker of the light bulb goes off, but he kind of just pushes it back, which we'll get to that point. So yeah, the poison is called Without a Cure, which I love that Shen is like, are you freaking serious? This is what you named it? What are you doing? Like, he's just so off-put. I loved the narration in this chapter set. Shen's narration is so funny, and it's so on point, and it's just so refreshing and just fun to read because he's very quick and witty and just sarcastic and snappy, but he has a heart, so you get exactly what he's talking about and you relate to it and you're like, oh my god, yes. So it's so well done. I loved it. I loved how it worked in this. And Xia Hualing, that is one thing that I'm glad the donghua kind of does, that I was like reading this, I was like, MXTX, but why? And that was whenever Liu shows up and blasts her away. And I'm not even going to put it on Conspiracy Board Sama. It's not that much of a detail. But in the donghua, she just gets blasted back, which, as one would. In this version, which we're going to talk about that. I guess I do need to put it up here. In this version, she gets blasted back by Liu, but it causes all of her clothes to like get ripped off in the process, which is like, really? And she's naked. I'm glad they don't give like any details or talk about it, but it's still like, And I guess the point of it is supposed to make you look at the author and go, really? You made her like be nude? She's supposed to be like 14. I was like, that part, I was like, she's 14 years old. Why are we undressing this girl? Why couldn't you just have the blast send it back? Which I guess is talking about, again, Shen is disappointed in the novel author, saying like, what are all these weird choices? Why did you make these? Why are we doing these? So I guess it's supposed to give credence to Shen being upset at the author and being like, what the fudge is this? But it was a weird moment because if she had been like, you know, an adult, I'd been like, okay, well, that's kind of sleazy and I don't like it. But the fact that she's 14 adds an extra creep factor to it that I'm like, I don't like that at all. So I'm glad that we didn't focus much on it. But the thing of it is, it's interesting, is that you have in the original, in this version, Xia Hualing gets knocked back and disrobed by the blast. But here, what was the original story? What happened originally? Because the whole thing was that they were testing to see if Shen was poisoned or not. Well, in the OG version, Shen doesn't get poisoned. So does this whole scene just not happen in the original novel? I guess she never gets disrobed or knocked back. Essentially, what it ends up doing, I guess, in a sense, is it keeps her from flirting with Luo. She gets knocked back and she's embarrassed and has to grab one of her subordinates' robes, and Liu shows up and makes them all leave. So I guess the end result is she does not get, so there's no flirting with Luo Binghe. So that could cause her not to end up in the harem. That could have changed the whole course of everything. And we don't know. I'm really excited to get to the point where I don't know what's going to happen next when we're past the donghua content, because then it's going to be like completely uncharted waters. And I'm going to be like, I don't know what we're doing now. Which I remember in Heaven Official's Blessing, I got to a point where we got past the donghua and I was like, oh, now I don't know where we are. And then it just like became this big thing. And I was so excited. Modao Zushi, I didn't have that experience because I watched the whole donghua before reading the novel. So it was a different experience. But this is going to be kind of similar to that, where I'm going to get to a point and go, oh, I don't know what we're doing. So that's going to be intriguing. But yeah. And Shen tries to pass it off like nothing's a problem. Everything's fine. Don't you worry. He's like, we'll just Miss Shaw. I like calls her Miss Shaw. Whatever the result, we're going to accept it completely. And then Liu shows up. I do like that we get a little bit with Shaw kind of questioning like what to do. Because she's like, if it doesn't work, she could die. Now, Liu doesn't kill her, which I think is good. Because I thought for a second when Liu showed up and pushed her back that she was literally going to die. And I was like, oh, we're going to kill her off now. And it was the rest of that all donghua only? But no, we don't. So that's good to know. But Luo, at this point, when we establish that now something that's changed with Luo's character is that Luo Binghe has completely let go of his anger at Shen QingQiu. Whereas in the original novel, this entire incident only fueled Luo Binghe's hatred. Again, this is like a big turning point. Just like the carriage scene. This scene here, and the novel makes it even more apparent than the donghua does, that at this moment, Luo's let go of his anger. He's just like, he's like, everything that you did in the past, Shen, forget about it. It's not important. You saved my life and you said these things. So now I know that you're actually a really good person. And Shen doesn't realize what he's done. And I'm like, dude, you've saved your own skin and you don't even realize it, which it's a good thing that he doesn't, because I think Shen, as intelligent as he is kind of a dork. And I don't know how romantically experienced he is. So I think he might have messed. And I think that it also is helpful because Shen's obliviousness keeps him from manipulating Luo, which, again, Luo is extremely emotionally driven. If Luo found out that Shen was emotionally compromising him and trying to manipulate him, well, then it would flip on a dime and he'd be really pissed. But because Shen has no clue what's going on, it's just him being genuinely nice. And that only helps his cause without him even realizing it. And it's like, oh my God. But yeah, he's like, he says, and this part here, I do like too that Shen is, even though he's trying to get Luo's favor and trying to be nice to him, he also doesn't skirt around the situation. He's like, since you know it was for your sake, put some effort into protecting your own life. He's like, you knew I was trying to protect you, so just do better to protect yourself. I like that their relationship is developing where they don't like sugarcoat it with each other. Luo is like a puppy dog. Luo is like, I would do anything for you, Shen. And Shen's like, well, protect yourself. Come on. He's like, let's get into this, you know? But in any case, Shaw decides to try to go for the strike to get him out of the way. My dog's being weird, whatever. And that's when Liu shows up. And I love that everybody's so excited that Liu's there. And Shen, as he's dying of this poison, is just like, ugh. As Shen's dying, he's like, oh, Liu, you damn show off. Could you have not arrived sooner? Leave some bad ass points for the rest of us. I love Liu's character, though. Liu is such an intriguing character, right? So anyway, I feel like MXTX, as much as I give her a little bit of grief for having that moment, the fan service pack Stallion novel, this world proved itself to truly be that. My dogs. That we have the scene with her like losing her clothes. And I like that hey guys, Liu's not even worried about it. He's like, oh, we'll just come and go as you please. Shameless, dream on. I feel like Liu's not even like threatened by her. He's just like, get out of here. And so then, yeah, they all get back. And then I liked that Shen is just like, you know, it's like it was the right decision to have Ying Ying to copy Zhu Yi and pound on the cave walls. So copy Zhu Yi. Okay. In the reaction, I had no clue what this meant. I was like, copy Zhu Yi. But basically he meant like imitate her, imitate the actress to come get it. So in this version, what happened was that Ning Ying Ying ends up, I didn't realize that Shen sent her, but I guess maybe as she was leaving, he's like, okay, she's going to go get help, which is going to be different than the original novel where she sticks around and causes drama. So in the OG version, she sticks around and causes drama, which in the original version, she probably would be there supporting Luo Binghe, who would have been, you know, nearly killed by Shen's plans. So it makes sense that she sticks around providing comfort to him so he gets more attached to her. But in this version, she's like already out of the picture. Like Luo isn't even caring about her anymore. Instead, she goes to find Liu to get him to come back, which ends up saving Shen's life. So that's good. But he was basically saying she was copying a actress in pounding on the walls of the cave till he came out. Love it. Love it. And then he's like, who's Zhu Yi? And he's like, oh, the world's greatest beauty. How am I? I like that Shen just gets to the point. He's like, we'll talk about it later, but how am I doing? How am I doing? And then I love that Shen calls Liu Chinge a tsundere, like just acknowledges it, which he kind of is, I guess, right? So in any case, he's like, let me lie down for a while. And Luo, of course, I liked the fact that it starts out, because I was wondering if it was going to be like the donghua, where he like puts the hand up to Luo's face. And I was like, was that just the donghua doing fan service? But no, it is actually, as it turns out. At first he tries to get up, but then he has Luo hold him down. And then he ends up doing like the little hand on his face and everything, which I love it. And he's like, he wanted to offer this crucial line to farm more favor. I knew you'd definitely win. And it works. It works. It farms favor indeed. But again, Shen is, you would think this would be manipulation, and it is, but Shen is not trying to necessarily emotionally manipulate Luo into falling in love with him. Instead, he's just trying to save his ass. He's just like, I just want you to take favor on me and not kill me. Please don't rip out my tongue and chop off my limbs, please. But what he doesn't realize is the effect that it's having overall and how deep this effect is, right? So I love the idea, though, that Shen points out. He's like, if anybody else was reading the book, they'd be like, and basically saying what Liu says later on. It's like, oh, this character was hurting Luo one moment and wanting Tim to die, and now he's saving him. How messed up is he? Multiple personalities. What a nut job. And it's like, no, it's just this character was a scum villain, and now Shen Yan is trying to make him not a scum villain. So there we go. So basically we get 50 more B points. Yay! We get 50 more points from there, which is exciting. Huzzah. We're getting more. Basically, Shen's character becomes more complex. He gets more depth and more suspense with his character because he may die. And I like that Shen's like, wait, so me nearly dying is what's going to take to get more points? I didn't ask for this. But yes. And then he sees Luo crying as he loses consciousness. But he doesn't, he's like, oh, Luo wouldn't be crying over me. The obliviousness. I feel like with Modao Zushi and Heaven Official's Blessing, both Wei Wuxian and Shi Lian's obliviousness, they both knew what was going down, but they were both in denial. They're both like, oh, well, no, what, who, me? They wouldn't like me. What? Here, Shin's really like, I don't get it. And I'm like, how do you not get it, sir? So this chapter set, we start part 3 of the novel, which I think there's 5 parts in this first novel. So us being halfway through the 3rd part, it doesn't look like we're halfway through, but we are technically with chapter-wise. So there's probably just a few more pages with the other upcoming chapters. And we're doing 4 next week, so we'll get through a big chunk. Favor points. So this chapter, let's talk about it, shall we? So yeah. So he's like, so Ming Fan, this basically is like the donghua where Shen wakes up, Ming Fan and Luo Binghe are there. He sends Ming Fan to go get everybody else so he can to go gather Liu and the doctor and Dare Officer so that they can come back and check him out. And then that's when he has this moment with Luo. And Shen does not get that Luo is head over heels for him now. He does not understand. He's like, system, what's going on? He's like, why was this kid standing by my bedside all day? Doesn't he have other things to do? Is he planning on hurting me? What's going on? And I'm like, oh, Shen, you don't even know. And so at this point, that's when Luo reveals to him. And I'm glad that Luo reveals that he's like, Luo is like, I realized that you cared about me and you put in all that effort to save me. And so I didn't think you cared about me, but now I know. And Shen's like, what did I do? I just saved you once. Is that all it took? Like, Luo is so impressionable that he's like, what efforts did I do? And like, at this point, we're like, Shen, you did the whole thing in the carriage. You've been nice to him. You gave him the manual. You saved his life. You've been kind to him and nice to him. And that's had this big impact and you don't even realize it. And he doesn't. I'm like, oh, yep. He's like, I'm going to devote myself to carrying out and serving you with all of my heart and obeying your esteemed commands. And Shen's like, and I like the idea that Shen doesn't necessarily he doesn't hear this and go, oh, awesome. I've saved myself. Day is done. We're all good. Great. I like that he kind of questions it. And he's like, kid, should you be this willing to devote yourself to me just because I did one nice thing to you? Is that okay? So part of me is wondering if a lot of this story is going to be Shen also trying to tell Luo Binghe to work for himself. And not blindly follow. And I think the whole abyss scene is now so foreign to me after this chapter, and now so anxiety inducing to me now. And I'm like, oh no. And I feel like we're going to get it by the end of this novel. I don't know when, and I don't know if it's going to be like the last chapter or what it is. I don't want to know, so don't tell me. But I'm really nervous about it now because they've established that it has to happen. And this book kind of makes it seem like it has to be Shen. Part of my thing was that, oh, well, maybe like Liu will cause it, or Gong Yi will cause it, or somebody else will end up kicking Luo into the abyss and he'll develop, but it won't be Shen's fault. This chapter set and the next one makes it seem like it has to be Shen that kicks him into the abyss. And I'm like, how are we going to twist that? Because at this point, Luo is saying, you can do no wrong, Shen QingQiu. You can do no wrong. We're great. I'm going to love you no matter what. And I'm like, but if he's going to have to kick you into the abyss, how's that going to work? And is Luo going to feel betrayed and question whether or not any of it was true? I feel like part of Shen's journey is to tell Luo, like, hey, it's cool if you love me, but I'm not perfect. And you need to figure out not to blindly follow someone, whether it's myself or Nightmare or whoever. And you need to realize that I'm not a perfect person. And I've not been doing these things just solely out of selflessness. Like there has been some self-preservation to it. So I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know how the story, how the massive fog of misunderstandings is going to spin it in Luo's mind to where the abyss was an act of love. I'm going to be real curious to see how it goes down, but we're not there yet. So, oh my God. I'm just like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go, but we're going to find out. So then he makes him the Kongi. I can't remember how you exactly pronounce it. It's been a long time since Modao Zushi. But even though Shen does not necessarily have to eat food, he's like, yeah, I kind of want that. He's like, I really want some food, so please. And then he gives it. I do like the detail where he describes, like, he basically, I don't know if in Modao Zushi there's the Gusu sect, which is where Lan Wangji is from. This, like, Qingjing Peak reminds me a lot of that. I don't know if it's kind of poking fun at that, but he basically describes Qingjing Peak as being clear and tranquil, which is kind of like Gusu and Modao Zushi. But also to him, that means they're bland as hell. And he's like, yeah, this thing is watery. Their usual food is watery. It's dull. His taste buds have become dull as dishwater. I love that description. It also reminds me of Modao Zushi because in that series, Wei Wuxian cooks a little bit. He puts a lot of spice into his cooking, which some of the sect members from Gusu are like, oh, it's so spicy. Oh, it's too much spice, too much. We're used to bland food. And that's kind of how it is in this series. So to Shen, he's like, oh my God, no, this food is amazing. But from here on in, the rest of this chapter, y'all, I have the fangirling waves exuding from my pores right now. You probably can't see the waves of fangirl exuding, but what this chapter is suggesting is basically, Luo's like, well, if Shizun likes it, may I give it to him every day with variations. We're going to go into the MXTX mind gutter for a hot second. And why Shen spit up and choked on his food. And he was only a little shocked. So in the donghua, they don't make a big deal out of this because censorship and we don't want to get our minds in the gutter, right? But basically, Luo is an excellent cook. So Luo has these excellent cooking skills. And in the original novel, his cooking skills was to woo his harem members. Right? Only a select number of ladies got the cuisine a la Luo Binghe. A rare honor only a few key harem members got. And then the line that he would coax several spoiled young ladies into enthusiastically and ecstatically joining his harem was, I'll give it to you every day with variations. Only, in this new one, only Shen is getting the meal. And that line that I will give it to you. I will give it to you every day with variations. We're going to put that on Conspiracy Board Sama. That to me sounds a little bit like every day is every day. That to me sounds like a promise that he is going to be willing to get out the old Kama Sutra, and every day with you, Shen, once you both realize your affections for one another down the road, y'all are going to do it every day with variation. It ain't going to be the same, but it's going to be different. He's going to bring you a different meal every day. And I'm like, yeah. And so Shen knows this. He knows. But the thing that's so frustrating is that Shen knows this is like his famous hookup line, his famous promise to his lady harem members, and Shen's like, well, that's so weird. He's doing this all for me? And I'm like, Shen, do you not get it? No, he doesn't. And then Shen takes it. Shen is like, he's like, as Luo's like, oh, do you just like it? Shen doesn't take it as, is this a sexual innuendo where Luo is basically insinuating that he's going to give it to me every day? And am I cool with that? And am I comfortable with that? Shen QingQiu takes it as free food. Which, you know, I'm a millennial. I feel like lots of millennials were like, you can woo us with many things. A free t-shirt and a free meal. We are there. We are every college event I ever went to that was like, we'll give you a free t-shirt or a free pizza party. And I'm like, haha, I'm going to be there in a heartbeat. Free food? Yes, please. Shen QingQiu and I, we are like-minded souls in that regard. We're like-minded souls in a lot of ways. We are both oblivious to sexual advances and we like free food. Yes. There's a reason I love his character so much. We jam. We gel. But yeah, he's like, oh, well, this master likes it very much. And from this day onward, I'll leave it to you. I'm like, do you know what you're saying? Do you realize the words coming out of your mouth and their implications? No, he doesn't. And I'm like, oh my God, Shen. Oh my God. Yeah. So yeah, basically that's what ends up happening. He's like, sure. And all Shen is thinking of is, wow, I have my own private chef now. And I'm like, you have a whole private kitchen. You're probably going to do it in the kitchen at some point in this novel. Here's the thing. They are promising, essentially, with the events of this, they are promising that there's going to be some activity. This chapter points out that there's going to be activity going down. The question is going to be when and how, but MXTX is laying down some foundation that I'm like, all right, let's see if it goes. And like Luo, realizing that he says yes, blossomed like a spring flower. Shen QingQiu watched him bloom, and without knowing why, he wanted to pat his head again. And so there are two moments. This is the first moment where he's like, does Luo, his head have a magnetic field? Why would I want to pat his head? And I'm like, oh my God. And so then that's when he asks, because Shen cares about Luo at this point, and he wants to know, can I get away from the endless abyss scenario? And the story is like, no, that is the catalyst. It has to happen. It's like the biggest catalyst in the story, apparently. It has to happen. Because apparently him going into the endless abyss allows him to activate the golden finger, which makes him this OP protagonist. So it has to occur. Which is fine, but I'm so intrigued and curious, and I like that MXTX has set up this tension of us being like, well, what's it gonna do to their relationship? How's this gonna go? What's the end result gonna be? I don't know. And because the story is changing so much from the OG story at this point, and we're only this far in, there's no telling what's gonna happen. So I'm really excited about this. When I started this novel, I thought that the whole thing was going to be Shen just trying to navigate through a set story and try to just orchestrate events to where it worked in his favor. But I was like, how is that going to be compelling? Because he's already going to know what happens. He's already going to know the end result. So it should be pretty easy for him to navigate. No, this story is establishing that things like the butterfly effects, one little thing triggering a whole nother set of events happening. It is like, you can't predict anymore. And so it's just like, and even Shen, the fact that he's so oblivious, doesn't realize it. It's like, oh my God, it's insane. So yeah, So he's like, that we have to do the Endless Abyss. And he says, and this novel's #1 loser, the #1 scum villain, the execution of the glorious task inescapably fell to him. So now that is the one question, though. Is it going to have to be Shen? The novel makes it seem like Shen's logic makes it seem like he believes he's the one that has to do it. But the question is going to be, is that truly the case? Because Shen also believes that certain events have to happen in the story, but we know that they don't end up happening. So my question is going to be, when we get to the point where the donghua showed like Wan Rong dying, we're going to talk about the flower thing in a minute, then it's going to be like, well, when he finds out that Wan Rong dies and that the story is changing, is he going to be like, does it have to be me that pushes him in the abyss? That's going to be the question. I wondered if like Ming Fan was going to push him into the abyss. Because right now they still establish that Ming Fan's really mad at him. And in the donghua, they kind of established that more and more people like leave Ming Fan to go under Luo Binghe as he gets older and trains. So I'm wondering if the events that are happening in this chapter where Ming Fan sees Shen like opening up and talking so nicely about Luo Binghe, and Ming Fan's like, but we made fun of him and tortured him all that time. What was that about? I wonder if it's going to lead his frustration and anger to the point where he ends up pushing Luo into the abyss, and then Luo comes back out to get revenge on him. I don't know. We don't know. At this point, it's just like, who the hell knows? So, so anyway, Shen believes he's been designated as the man who has to throw the protagonist into the endless abyss, catalyzing his overpowered legendary journey. I love that Shen calls this like a job. He's like, there's no potential for growth. He's like, difficult pay, meager pay, no benefits. What the hell is this? He's like, how'd I get tasked with this job? Right? But then everybody comes up. I wanted to know what novel was hidden inside of like the religious Taoism text, but they don't tell us. I'm like, was it a porno? Is it just like smut that he's reading inside of it? How did he have a novel hidden inside the copy of it? We don't know. So maybe we'll find out one day. Maybe we'll find out what he was reading. I guess maybe we'll see that again eventually. But yeah, I do like the kind of like back and forth seesawing of them apologizing to themselves. And it's like this Three Stooges, like who's on first business, like skit where they're like, well, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. No, it's my fault. And Lou's just sitting there like, oh my God, can you stop? I imagine every time the donghua did such a good job of animating Liu, like just fading into frame and just coming into view and just looking so done. And the best part about it is that Liu's not supposed to be there. He's not supposed to be there at all in this scene. So every scene that we see Liu in, it's like he's not supposed to be there. So because of that, originally, there's a lot of OG to new thing. Oh, in the OG version, I would imagine that Ming Fan and Shen, because there wasn't the conversation with Liu, they just kept torturing Luo. Again, to the point where he just reached his breaking point. Whereas in this one, because Liu is alive, in this one, Shen actually sets up him to maybe even train Luo Binghe. We'll talk about that in a hot second. But it's like the total opposite is happening, and Ming Fan is really confused, which would make sense for Ming Fan because he's like, we've been torturing and making for this kid all up until now, and now we're not. So what's the deal? And that's why Liu is confused as well. But it's changing the story, just like these little tiny moments. So anyway, he's like, oh, without a cure, its effects can be suppressed. And Shen's like, I have hit the jackpot. Now, the poison. Cusco's poison. The poison to kill Cusco. Oh, Shen QingQiu's poison. The poison to kill Shen QingQiu. I feel like it's like Kronk from Emperor's New Groove with Shen QingQiu. So here's the thing about the poison. We're going to move this over here. In the original novel, the poison was introduced. Without a cure did exist, which is good to know. So without a cure, which we're going to call like this, did exist. In this version, in the new version, which we're going to put over here, in the new version, what ends up happening is that we're going to suppress suppress the poison using Liu and the meds. So as long as Shen takes the meds and has Liu help him, we will suppress the poison. Now, they did establish that at times it's going to lock up, and that's when we left off in the donghua. That's one of those moments that it happens. And the only ones that know about this are Liu, Dare Officer, the doctor, and him. Luo suspects something's wrong, but doesn't quite know the situation yet. So here's the thing. As far as we know, for the remainder of the story, for the remainder of all 4 novels, up until the climax or whenever this is going to be a major plot point that needs to happen, as long as Liu is around, Shen should be okay. Takes his medicine, Liu helps him, we're good. Everything's fine. He does not have to get the mystical flower or anything like that. He should be fine. Which I'm like, okay, that could last up to a certain point, right? In the original novel, at the conference, where we're at, that supposedly has twist after twist after twist, another lovable and subdued Shime from another sect was hit by a rare poison. So at the conference, which is where we're going to in this book, there was a girl that was poisoned. Okay. Is this girl Wanrong? Is this girl won by a person from the sect? It would be interesting if it was Wanrong, and then when she dies, then that's the point where Shen's like, well, wait, how's Luo gonna find the cure for the poison if she's dead? Well, there just happens to be somebody poisoned in her place, doesn't there? I'm like, oh my God. So is this gonna be like Wanrong, and when she dies, Luo's gonna have to help find the cure for Shen because it's him instead of her? Possibly. So what stallion novel would it be if he couldn't find a cure for it? But the cure is incredibly simple. We just have to review the developments. So, due to the irresistible power of the plot to save the male lead, whom she'd known for less than 2 hours, which I like that we're subverting that. Shen has known him for quite some time now. This girl had known him for less than 2 hours. She let herself be hit by a demon underhanded trick. In this case, Shen let himself be hit by the poison by the demon's underhanded trick, and the poison contaminated them. And Luo felt an obligation to save her, as he feels an obligation to save Shen, so he took on the burden for looking for a cure. And it just so happened there was a mythical 1,000-year-old flower. So there's this flower that's in the mountain. Okay. I like that Shen makes fun of the novel because he's like, yeah, there's like 100 mythical flowers that are 1,000 years old. And he's like, who can remember all of their names of the grasses, trees, mythical things? And he's also like, why are there so many? Is there like a cabbage sale on mythical flowers? He's like, why aren't they rare and precious? I like that he points out and makes fun of the novel, being like, if you have hundreds and hundreds of mythical rare items, they are no longer mythical and rare. So he's like, what are you doing? Why is this happening? So, again, my dogs. So yeah, so Luo was sure the flower would cure the poison. So he put all this effort into picking it for her. And I like the idea that in 3 days or 30 chapters, they fought monsters, exchanged flirtatious glances, and developed a deep sense of camaraderie. So I think in the mountain, this whole flirtatious adventure to find the flower is going to be something that happens with Shen instead. I think that instead, Shen is going to go on the adventure. I think they're going to get there to the mountain. They're going to get to the Congress. They're going to get to a point where Shen's like, as they're leaving the spiders, where it left off at, because it seems to happen before the Endless Abyss segment. In that regard, I feel like Shen's going to be like, hey, while we're near this mountain, there might be a flower that helps cure my poison. Want to go find it? Let's go try to do that. But he might not because of what ends up happening here. Because he says next, they find the flower and she eats it, but it doesn't work. And then here's the part where she's like, well, since I'm about to die, I might as well have like one round with you before I die. And I'm going to have sex with you before I die. And Luo's like, I mean, she did it for my sake. How can I reject her final wish? So what ends up happening is that she has sex with Luo and it cures her. Now, this is a big landmine. This is a big landmine, right? This is a landmine. How does that even work? How does having sex with Luo end up work? But it was satisfying, right? Ridiculously satisfying. So ridiculously satisfying. Ha 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 ha. And I feel like in Shen in that moment being like, yeah, the sex was satisfying with Luo, right? She would think that. I mean, I could understand why she would think that. Mm-hmm. And apparently Luo was of human and demon blood. And so he had this, since he has the blood of the saintly rumor, the demonic poison wasn't strong enough to get stuck between him, and he absorbed and digested it during their sex. You know. And he absorbed the nutrients of the flower the girl had eaten, so his martial ability made great progress. So in the end, the act just made Luo stronger. And he absorbed the poison by having sex with her. Yeah. So, it's a landmine. It's a plot hole, but it ends up getting justified somehow. So here's the question. I could see Shen being like, hey, we're here at this mountain. Let's find this flower, and it might help with my poison. Mm-hmm. And if it is a plot point for Luo to absorb the flower, then I could see Shen being like, well, he's got to absorb the flower because it's part of the plot. It's part of him making him stronger. Now, the question is, do I think that Shen and Luo are going to have sex on the mountain this early on in the story? God, no. No, I don't think that that's going to happen at all. No. But what I wonder is if Shen's like, well, how do I get this poison out of me? And how do I get him to have the flower instead? So I think one of three things are going to happen. Either one, none of this is going to happen. He's not going to take him to the mountain to get the flower. He's going to be like, that was dumb. No, I've got this method of suppression. We're fine. We don't have to go that route, whatever. I still think they might be, or it could be one of the scenarios where they do go on the adventure so they can flirt and do stuff along the way like he was originally going to do with that girl, and it's just going to strengthen their relationship. But when they get to the flower, either the flower gets destroyed or they try it and it still doesn't do anything, and it's like, oh, womp womp, and then something else happens. That's scenario number one. Scenario number two is that they manage to get to the flower and Shen manages to eat it and nothing happens. And Luo's like, well, what could I do? How could I? But Shen's not going to throw himself at Luo because that's not Shen. That's not how he works. And he's oblivious and is like, no, that's not going to be a thing. So something gets interrupted or something happens where he uses the flower to save Luo. Like something happens where Luo gets poisoned or something and Shen uses the flower to give to him to save him. Something like that, and just furthers their relationship that way. Or what I think might happen, the one that I want to happen is that Shen and Luo go up to the mountain. They have all their flirtatious adventures. They flirt inadvertently. Shen doesn't even realize that they're flirting. Or maybe he starts to realize, and this will be the moment that he starts to realize their relationship developing. And then they find the flower. And then they try to use it. He tries to eat it. It doesn't work. And then somehow, like him and Luo maybe kiss. Maybe it's something innocent, like just a kiss. And that sucks the poison out. But then a part of me is like, is the poison going to be a long-term thing that Shen carries throughout the entire novel, and then at the very end he has sex with Luo and that's how it gets out? I don't know. Or is it something that they cure with the flower now in this novel before the Endless Abyss? I don't know. But they're setting up the idea that by having sex with Luo you can be cured of some type of ailment. They're setting that up. Whether or not that comes to fruition or not, I don't know. But Shen knows about it. He knows it's a possibility. He knows he's poisoned. He knows that the cure involves having sex. So he's like, well, but... So it feels like that is going to be a plot point that Shen knows that while he's thinking about this, he gets called back into reality. So then they talk about him taking the medication and everything, and you'll be fine. And Shen's really satisfied knowing that he can live without a cure. He's like, yeah. he's like, he knew that going at it with the protagonist could have cured the poison, but like he could do that. Could he? That moment there, that moment about it being increasingly satisfying and him like hanging on that sex with Luo was extremely satisfying. Him hanging on that, which we've already established why it would be incredibly satisfying from what the book tells us. But also the idea, this is the first moment in chapter 15 where Shen goes, well, yeah, going at it with the protagonist can cure the poison, but like I could do that. I mean, could I? I don't know. I feel like at this moment, Shen doesn't deny it. He doesn't throw it off being like, no, I could never have sex with the protagonist. No, he's like, oh, could I? And nervous laughs it off, which means that the thought has come to his mind now. And he knows that that's a possibility. So the question may be like, if he gets to a point where Liu either dies in the story, because at this point Liu's just a walking dead man, who knows if he's going to live through the whole thing, or if he runs out of medicine, or if something happens, he knows having physical intimacy with Luo would save him. But the question is, I don't feel like Shen is the type of person that would take advantage of Luo without his consent. And I don't feel like he's the type of person that would have sex with him just to save himself. So I feel like that's going to be, and I feel like that could even like, if it gets out that Shen's like, well, I know that having sex with you could save me, but I don't want to do something you're not comfortable with. That's just going to make Luo love him even more. So I don't know, but there's so many possibilities with this segment of the story that I'm like, what are you setting up, MXTX? What are you setting up in the first volume? Oh my God. So yeah, and then I like the idea that Shen is like, okay, we've got to go through this. We're going to go to the Congress. It's fine. And that's when Liu's like, yeah, we're going to keep all this a secret. And he's also like, you know what? You're not the person that I thought you were before. Something's up with you. Something's different, right? Also, that line that Shen says, he's like, when he's trying to like calm Dare Officer down, and he's like, oh, for now, my hands, my feet, my mouth still work, and I have my cultivation. I'm extremely satisfied. He's basically saying, like, I have my limbs. I don't have my tongue cut out. We're doing great. Oh my God. You could also have a sexual connotation with it, but I'm keeping my mind out of the gutter now. But yeah, but Liu's onto something. Liu's onto something. And I hadn't thought about this, but we talked about it when in this chapter where Liu first came back, that Liu might be a barrier for Luo if he like, starts to feel like maybe in that chapter when Shen was inadvertently flirting with Liu and Liu's like, what the fudge are you doing? I wondered if Liu might, him and Shen might end up with a relationship that Luo misunderstands as being more than just friends. But in this chapter, Shen is worried that Liu may become a stumbling block on Luo's journey and could actually end up being killed. And he's like, oh shit. He's like, I need Liu around to keep me alive so that I don't have to have sex with the protagonist. So I can't have Liu making a mistake and getting on Luo's bad side, because we know how that works, where Luo gets revenge on people. So he's like, oh no. He's like, you need to make sure you're on Luo's good side. So let's just make sure we do that. So he's like, let's just, give him support and guidance as often as possible. And that's when Ming Fang gets upset. And it's like, But he kind of reveals all this to Luo Binghe, who takes it as like the most he takes it as a huge sign of compliment, where he's like, oh my God, my Gege said that about me. He's like, he said that about me. He said that I was like, he talked me up in front of like one of the Peak Lords and asked the Peak Lord to support me. Oh my gosh. Like, it has the exact opposite effect. At this point, Luo is like a kid on cloud 9. His idol is like all about him. He saved his life. He's talking him up in front of others. He's having the best day ever. So even Ming Fang can't bring him down. He's just like, he's having the best day, which is why I think that Shen ends up in his dreams, because originally in the OG, which we'll find out, I'm not going to write it on whiteboard because we're going to find it out next chapter, I'm sure. In the original one, Luo ends up incorporating the women that he's closest to into his dream, which was Ning Ying Ying at the time, into his dream to explore. But here, since Shen QingQiu is the closest person to him in his heart, he's the one that ends up in the dream. And I'm like, Shen, this isn't a bad thing. Shen treats it like it's a bad thing. He's like, why am I here? Why am I in his dreams? I don't want him to think about me in his sleep because that means he's going to kill me. And I'm like, no, Shen, this is a good thing. You being in his dreams is a good sign. That means he cares about you. But our oblivious peacock does not realize what is going on. And I'm like, oh my God. But he's like, a peaceful night's sleep, my ass. I love that the system's just like, hi, yes, we are here for 24 hours. What would you like? And he's like, "Rrr." And that's when he's like, this is your dream realm. Y'all, this whole chapter set has me theorizing about how intimate the relationship between Luo and Shen QingQiu is going to get. And I don't know the answer yet, but I do know that this set of chapters has made me very, very excited about this whole flower business. Very excited about the Congress meet when we get there, and everything that we're going to have happen. And very excited that we didn't lose B points. We gained them instead. So I've talked over an hour about this chapter set. I'm super excited to hear your thoughts down below. Oh my God. So next week, we're going to be going into 4 chapters, which is mind-blowing, y'all. Mind-blowing. But we're going to be doing 4 chapters next week, which is really exciting. Chapters 16 through 19. And I cannot wait. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And I'm going to go put all of this into Conspiracy Board Sama. And I'll see y'all next week with another chapter set of Scum Villain's self-saving system. Bye!